Strategic, Anita? Really? I'm going to review and critique Anita Sarkeesian's latest episode on feminist frequency entitled Strategic Butt Coverings. And the one thing I'm going to try to do for the rest of this video, except where absolutely necessary, is refrain from the use of the word butt. There's something infantile to me about the way she utilizes that word throughout her video. There have already been countless videos made mocking this continued use of the word butt. There's other, obviously, names for that part of the female or human anatomy. And I'm not sure why she didn't, branch out a little bit more. She did say rear end once, I think, and behind maybe or something. I'm going to use ass. I think that's a little bit more common colloquial. The butt thing seems to be a little bit more childish to me. And maybe it's just a personal gripe. I don't know. I'm going to try to go through quickly a lot of the more obvious points that need to be addressed when it comes to this video that she's made, and save my most important point, the point I haven't really heard made by anyone else yet. Now, there could be a video out there where someone's covered it, but I haven't at least been aware of it, and save that point for the end. So the obvious, obvious is obvious, right? I need a t-shirt. She starts off by saying, if you want to get to know a character's thoughts, feelings, wishes, hopes, dreams, their butt's probably not going to give you that information. Well, clearly it's not. You might look elsewhere for that information. So I don't know what point, again, obvious is obvious. She seems to know a lot, however, throughout the entire video about the player's motives and the creator's motives. That's her whole point of this idea of strategic butt coverings. Oh, I did it. Well, what can I do? I can't help it. For the male characters and not so much for the female characters. That this is all highly intentional. Now, I would agree with her that being able to show the female characters' rear ends is something that they would want to do as game developers, knowing their market, as she admits throughout the video, and as I'm going to hold as valid, that this is a predominantly and presumably male audience, the players of these games, and so they know their audience. Are they utilizing strategic butt coverings here in order to hide the ass of the male character? Well, that's to assume that the inclusion of a cape at all or loose baggy pants is specifically for that reason, and not because it is consistent with that character in the first place. I think Batman always had a cape, didn't he? And more men tend to wear loose baggy pants than women, if you look in the general Western populace, right? So to claim that it's strategic, I think, is a claim that requires some kind of evidence, right? She makes a lot of assertions, including the assertions of the motives of the people playing the game. And this omniscience of hers extends to the way in which the players of the games internalize or conceptualize their gaming experience. She says that, this has the impact, a significant impact on the way that the players view the character. The fact that their ass is sort of on display. I'm not sure how she knows how the game impacts any given player. She's claiming to have knowledge here that she obviously can't have, and I would say it's demonstrably false if you just talk to a few people about their actual gaming experience, right? It's certainly not true in my case. Granted, I play racing titles and Grand Theft Auto online. Mostly I've completed the story mode, but I didn't particularly like it. I like a little more freedom. I like the free roam, the open world aspect of things, and I do play as a female character. We'll get to a little bit of that later on. But that doesn't change the way I view her simply because I can see her ass. Really what this is a demonizing of male sexuality, right? We are visual creatures. This is not anything that's a mystery to anyone, and we do appreciate the female form. I made a Google Plus post last night before I went to bed where I said, the only reason you even exist, Anita, is because of butts. I used her word. Right? This is basic biology. We understand that the female form, this is why, if you're going to be a student of science, you might want to appreciate the fact that the scientific theory is that as we became upright, the breasts on the female human being became larger in order to mimic, through cleavage, the look of our ass, right? Of their ass. And in other words, to continually sexually excite the males of the species, to be that attraction that drives them towards procreation. Now, I'm forever hearing about how women's sexuality is constrained and they're not free, they're not actualized sexually, and I actually agree with a lot of that. But I think the issue is that we're all constrained and we're all not actualized. I think that's where a lot of unhealthy sexual behavior sometimes stems from. The more you try to repress sexuality, sometimes it comes out, it squeaks out through the cracks in unhealthy ways possibly. Male sexuality is definitely demonized. We're visual creatures, and so any attempt to, access that stimulus is looked down upon, right? I would say my body and my choice. Well, my eyeballs like to feast upon the female form, and that body, that choice, that's not okay, right? Now, of course, we've more and more looked down upon leering and that sort of thing, and it's become less and less acceptable in our modern culture to stare at a woman. Catcalling is not considered acceptable, even if it's have a nice day, beautiful, something like that. So, there's other outlets for that, right? There's obviously pornography. It started with Playboy and Penthouse for a lot of us when we were younger, that natural exploration that young males will have, and females as well. Not to mention, just as a quick aside, the whole assumption that this is all for men excludes, I think, lesbian women who may find the female ass attractive, but also even just females in general. I think most fashion shows and beauty pageants are really geared towards women. Women actually like looking at women too, even straight women. Getting back to the demonization of male sexuality, however, we've got these other outlets. We've got some pornography. The feminists want to shut that down. We've got whatever the page is that used to be in one of the main papers in the UK. They shut that down, right? Where I think it was a frontal nudity, topless woman or whatever in one of the main rags, as they call them in the UK. That's been shut down. They want to shut down now the display of female sexuality in video games, including their breasts and their ass, right? And these are some of the last vestiges for men to be able to access their own sexuality and just gaze. And it's not just that. I mean, it's just visual appreciation, right? I visually appreciate a mountain range. I visually appreciate a lot of the lines of certain cars. I find to be incredibly attractive, for lack of a better word, and I like looking at them. They're pleasing to the eye, right? And this aspect of male sexuality is highly demonized, and they want to clamp down on it in every way, shape, and form that they can. I think it's interesting, too, that she notes the exaggerated hip sway, and I looked at that video of Catwoman, I guess it is, and I didn't think it was all that exaggerated. I've known real-life women who exaggerate or sway their hips far more than that. So are we now demonizing, are we shaming a hip sway now? Is that what we're doing, right? She'd said famously in one of her other videos, that you should tone down the boobs in your game, as though there aren't large-breasted women, that couldn't be represented by someone in the actual population, right? Her answer, of course, to all this is not to uncover the ass or the behind or the rear end or the derriere of the male characters, but actually to increase the strategic butt coverings to include both sexes. Anita really, she demonstrates herself here not as a feminist, but as a traditionalist. She's actually just a prude. She doesn't want people to expose their bodies to other people because somehow natural sexuality is just pure objectification. We'll get to that a little bit later. I'm always reminded of an anecdote by, I can't remember his name now, Jacques Fresco. And he was telling a story once about how when he was young, somewhere around his early 20s or even late teens, he got fed up with society and he wanted to move to some island somewhere, and he did that. And there was a native tribe of people there, and all the women were topless. It's hot, you know what I mean? Like, why would they wear something covering themselves if it's going to be completely uncomfortable? And there was no, I'm sure, the nipples are still erogenous zones, but there was no stigma around female breasts among the population of that island. These are all cultural things, right? And, the feminists are all about challenging cultural norms and stereotypes, but not really, right? And he tells the story about how some missionaries came to this island as well to spread the good word, and they erected a church, and they encouraged all of the native people to come into the church, and these missionaries, the preachers, They had a hard time giving their sermons because of all the naked breasts in the room. And of course, they come from a different culture. And I'm sure that tied them into all kinds of knots internally, right? All these beautiful brown breasts, you know, well tanned. And I'm sure that drove them nuts. So they actually got them all shirts. They got shirts for the women, the native women population to wear to the church. Of course, these women tried these shirts on and they'd never had anything pressing down on their breasts before. Totally unnatural feeling. So these guys thought they'd solved the problem. They could sleep at night without having visions of these islander women's breasts floating through their dreams and having to, you know, beg for forgiveness for their thoughts after the fact. So they get all the women into the church at the next occasion, and they're all wearing their shirts, but they've cut out holes where the breasts are, so they could have that feeling that they're normalized to, right, of having their breasts free. Didn't really work, but you know that kind of illustrates the way in which those things are purely cultural and simply just covering up the human anatomy. It doesn't really address any of the issues that might be around. I mean, it could very well be that what we need is to actually uncover more, that we need to be more exposed. I'm not making that argument necessarily, but it's just a classic example to me of not thinking things through when you talk about challenging cultural norms and stereotypes, and then you just reaffirm them in this traditionalist way. Now, she constantly refers to these characters as people and women that you identify with. And I just want to be clear, these are not people and these are not women. These are characters, and you can choose to sort of identify with them if you like, but if you don't, that doesn't mean you're objectifying some real woman somewhere. People have the ability to separate fantasy from real life. And she makes the point, not in this video, but in another video, where she says, when you objectify one of these characters and reduce them to that of an object, then violence against that object becomes acceptable. Well, that's present in most video games. Most video games are actually kind of violent, right? That's really the whole point. But that has no connection to a real-world objectification of women. That doesn't mean that suddenly you see all women as objects. We are, again, capable of separating fantasy from reality. She also doesn't offer any of the counterpoints, the obvious counterpoints. In one scene, she's talking about how, of course, this woman's ass or character's ass is being displayed, and how that is, causing you to focus, that the creators want you to focus. And she doesn't make the obvious counterpoint that the dialogue, and she actually shuts up for just a minute and lets the dialogue continue, and the female character is exuding this highly specialized knowledge. Oh, well, this is reminiscent of the early Germanic such and such, right? So she's obviously, the game developers have intended to give her a very precise intellect. She seems to be the knowledgeable one in the scene, and no word about that, right? It's all about the display of her ass cancels out every other aspect of the scene. And so I would say to Anita, if you want to know about someone's hopes and desires and dreams and intellect, their butt's probably not going to give you that information. Maybe you should actually internalize your own message. This is further exemplified by her assertion that the game developers, in encouraging you to ogle and objectify these female characters, they're actually implicitly discouraging you from identifying with them as real women or human beings. Now, first of all, they're pixels, not people. And the game developers' motivations are something that maybe they could tell you, and the players' interpretations and their own motives are something that you might want to ask them as well. But this alludes to the biggest challenge, the biggest issue I have with Anita Sarkeesian and most of the modern feminists out there, is she's actually objectifying men with all of these statements. Of course, keep in mind that what we're really talking about is video games made for a market that is largely male. And there's nothing wrong with men liking the look of female bodies. That's really why we're all here. It's basic biology. And there's not actually anything really wrong with objectification. I'm pretty sure that Anita Sarkeesian objectifies a lot of men. The FedEx guy, the wait staff at her favorite restaurant, maybe the chef who's cooking her food. And the assertion by her in another video that objectification means that violence against that object is suddenly acceptable, I doubt that when she gets her latte made wrong, or when the wait staff doesn't take her order correctly, or when the chef doesn't cook her food properly, or there's a hair in her soup. First of all, I don't think she cares an awful lot about the hopes, dreams, wishes, and aspirations of those people. She's objectifying them. All she cares about their interaction is that she gets her latte or she gets her soup or whatever it is done correctly. The package is delivered on time. The guy doesn't drop kick it onto her doorstep. She doesn't give a shit about those people, first of all. She's objectifying them, and that's okay. You're not meant to have more of a relationship than that unless you desire to mutually, right? But does this objectification of hers give her the sense that violence against those people is acceptable? Does she think it's okay to kick the shit out of the waiter for not taking her order right, or marching into the kitchen and bitch slapping the chef for putting a hair in her soup, or not cooking something properly, or to shoot the FedEx guy for being late? I kind of don't think so. And, we know that we all objectify people in different ways. What I object to here most, however, is this objectification of men as incapable, as one track, incapable of entertaining more than one simultaneous thought or emotion at once, right? We're automatons. And she creates, of course, a false dichotomy that you either identify with another person as a real human being or you objectify them physically. I got news for you. I like my wife's body. She's sexy. It's attractive to me, right? I like to touch it. I also have a great deal of respect for my wife. We engage in intellectual conversations. I respect her highly as a human being, probably more than any other person on this planet. Yeah, interestingly enough, I'm capable of those things coexisting simultaneously. And it is an objectification of men, i.e. turning them into some kind of robotic automaton, to suggest that they're incapable of having those same things happen at the same time. To appreciate someone's physical beauty and at the same time respect their sovereignty, right? Their individuality, their intellect, their hopes and dreams, etc., etc. In fact, in this whole video, she gives more dimensionality to these characters, these pixels in these video games, than she does real life men. She's the objectifier here. I don't know if this is based on her own experience, if she's only met dicks. I'm not sure. But I assure you, Anita, the majority of men out there, especially the family men who are working hard every day to provide for their families, they're not like that. Right? And if there are men like that, I would submit to you that it has a lot to do with the stigma that we create around sex and male sexuality, that has a lot to do with unhealthy behaviors. And it's not okay to express yourself. She really reduces men to this base grunting, incapable of entertaining more than one thought at a time, Neanderthal, right? It's pretty disgusting, and it is objectifying. Not to mention, this stuff gets old really fast, right? So I had always played racing titles. I discovered the open world concept of Grand Theft Auto Online. I really like it. I created a female character. I remember hearing a bunch of male feminists in a video once talking about how the only reason that men play female characters in video games is because they want to ogle the titties and look at the ass, etc., etc. It's all about titillation. I've always identified with women from the youngest age. Sure, some of it was probably sexual curiosity when I was young, but when my parents would go to a big party or something, I always gravitated to where the women were talking. I felt more comfortable, I was interested in the conversation, and I soaked up a lot of it. And to this day, if I have an opportunity, to go and speak to a woman versus a man, I probably will do that. It's not I don't dislike men, but I just feel more comfortable with that. And when I created my Grand Theft Auto Online character, to me, there was not even a decision. I was going to play as a female. And even my wife remarked, "Oh, you're playing as a female?" And I thought, how long have you known me? Like, I think that would be obvious, right? That's the way that I would go. And I didn't know at the time, actually, it's not that easy to create an attractive female character in Grand Theft Auto Online. Use the online character creation tool. And if you just hit the random button, most of them are hideous. I obviously hit the random button a few times, found a character that looked reasonable, and then you can go in and tweak a lot of the adjustments. I created a very pretty character. And yeah, for about 3 days, it was interesting to be playing in third person and watching her hips sway and looking at her ass. That gets old pretty fast, right? What I did find, however, was that as I played Jen, that's my character, Janice, to be specific, I did start to develop in my mind who she is. I actually started to develop this persona around Jen. What are the things that she would do? What are the things she wouldn't do? What are her ethics? And I actually have modified my gameplay, not really thinking about it, but accordingly. If I look back now, I can realize there's lots of stuff I don't do because that's not what Jen would do. And it's kind of interesting that it would go that way. I now really enjoy Jen. I've actually commissioned some artists to illustrate her for me in a more realistic format and been highly pleased with the results. Mostly for soft feminine beauty. They aren't I haven't commissioned an illustration of her ass or her tits. Thanks. And I really identify with her. She may even be more of an alter ego now than just a character that I play. My wife was asking me for my opinion on some boots she bought, and I gave her my opinion, and she said, "Is that you or is that Jen speaking?" But anyway, again, this idea that this physical attraction exists, as a complete entirety, blocking out all other possibilities is ridiculous. It reduces men down to base grunting idiots. And if this is modern feminists' view of men, and if this is Anita Sarkeesian's view of men, well, this is the real objectification, the dangerous and negative objectification that's taking place. This is an admission of rendering an entire sex down to a singularity, down to a single dimension. That is the real objectification taking place here. Thanks for watching.